The world seemed to tilt on its axis the moment I saw the email. It was a cold, sterile message, devoid of any human compassion, informing me that my services were no longer required. The rain outside mirrored the storm raging within me as I stared blankly at the screen, the words blurring through the tears that welled up in my eyes. They had taken everything. My career, my stability, my sense of self-worth, all gone with a single click. They thought they could break me, reduce me to nothing. Little did they know, they had just lit the fuse of a meticulously crafted plan for their downfall. If you truly love your sister, subscribe now. My name is Nicole, and for the past 7 years, I had poured my heart and soul into Zenith Corporation. I started as an intern, fresh out of college, brimming with ambition and eager to prove myself. I climbed the corporate ladder, each rung representing countless hours of hard work, dedication, and sacrifice. I spearheaded major projects, consistently exceeding expectations and earning the trust and respect of my colleagues. Zenith wasn't just a job, it was my life. I practically lived and breathed that place. I saw my future unfolding within its glass walls, a future filled with success, recognition, and a comfortable life. And a huge part of that was due to Mrs. Eleanor Vance, the CEO. Eleanor took me under her wing, mentoring me, guiding me, and championing my ideas. I genuinely believed she saw me as a protégé, someone she was grooming to take over the reins one day. We had lunches together, confided in each other about our personal lives, and even went on a few weekend trips. Eleanor became more than just a boss, she was a friend, a confidant, a surrogate mother figure. She knew my deepest insecurities, my wildest dreams, and everything in between. That's why her betrayal cut so deep. The building where Zenith Corporation was housed wasn't just some random office space, it was owned by my family. My grandfather had built it decades ago, and it had been passed down through generations. The Vance family had been tenants for years. I even offered Eleanor a ridiculously low rate, far below market value, as a gesture of goodwill and a testament to our friendship. It was my way of ensuring that Zenith could thrive and that Eleanor could continue to build her empire. The weeks leading up to my dismissal were a blur of hushed conversations, furtive glances, and closed-door meetings. I could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the subtle chill in Eleanor's demeanor. When I asked her if everything was all right, she dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand, assuring me that it was just stress and that I shouldn't worry. I wanted to believe her, but the knot in my stomach tightened with each passing day. Then came the day when Eleanor called me into her office. Her eyes lacked their usual warmth, and her voice was devoid of any emotion as she delivered the news. The reason? Restructuring. Apparently, my position was redundant, and they were moving in a new direction. The irony was almost unbearable. I, the person who had dedicated years of my life to Zenith, was now being cast aside like yesterday's garbage. What made it even worse was that my replacement was already lined up, Eleanor's niece, a recent college graduate with zero experience. It was blatant nepotism, a slap in the face to everyone who had worked tirelessly to build Zenith's success. I walked out of Eleanor's office in a daze, my mind reeling, my heart shattered. I felt like I had been punched in the gut, the wind knocked out of me. The world seemed to spin around me, and I struggled to maintain my balance. I somehow managed to gather my belongings, pack them into a box, and leave the building without uttering a single word. The person I trusted most was one of them. The drive home was a blur of tears and disbelief. How could Eleanor do this to me? After everything I had given her, after all the sacrifices I had made, she had discarded me like a broken toy. The weight of the betrayal settled upon me, crushing me with its immense force. Sleep evaded me that night. I tossed and turned in bed, replaying the scene in Eleanor's office over and over again in my mind. Each time, the pain intensified, the anger simmered. I tried to reason with myself, to find some logical explanation for her actions, but there was none. It was a cold, calculated move, designed to benefit her and her family at my expense. The injustice of it all was overwhelming. I had always been a loyal and dedicated employee, willing to go the extra mile for Zenith. I had poured my heart and soul into that company, sacrificing my personal life, my relationships, and my well-being. And for what? To be betrayed by the person I trusted most, the person I considered a friend? The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a sense of dread. The thought of facing the world, of explaining to my friends and family what had happened, filled me with anxiety. I called in sick, unable to muster the strength to leave my apartment. I spent the day wallowing in self-pity, replaying the events in my head, and wondering what I had done to deserve this. As the days turned into weeks, I tried to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. I updated my resume, reached out to my network, and started applying for jobs. But the rejections piled up, each one a painful reminder of my failure. The market was saturated, and my sudden dismissal from Zenith seemed to be a red flag for potential employers. The whispers had already begun, I could feel it. My savings dwindled, and the financial pressure mounted. I had always been responsible with my money, but I never anticipated being unemployed for this long. The fear of losing my apartment, of becoming homeless, gnawed at me. Desperate, I swallowed my pride and reached out to Eleanor. I asked her if there was anything she could do, any way she could help me find a new job. She feigned sympathy, offering empty platitudes and vague promises, but nothing concrete. It became clear that she had no intention of helping me. She had gotten what she wanted, and now she was washing her hands of me. That's when the anger truly ignited. It wasn't just about losing my job anymore, it was about the betrayal, the lies, the manipulation. Eleanor had used me, taken advantage of my loyalty and trust, and then discarded me when I was no longer of use to her. I realized that I couldn't let her get away with it. I couldn't let her destroy my life and walk away unscathed. I had to fight back. I had to make her pay for what she had done. But how? I was just one person against a powerful corporation and a ruthless CEO. The odds were stacked against me. I knew that I couldn't confront her directly, she would simply deny everything and use her influence to silence me. I needed a plan, a strategy, something that would expose her for who she really was and bring her empire crashing down. The anger began to morph into a cold, calculated resolve. I wouldn't let them see me sweat. I started documenting everything. Every email, every conversation, every meeting I could remember. I was meticulous. I started reaching out to old colleagues, subtly probing them for information, trying to understand what had really happened behind closed doors. Most were hesitant, afraid of retribution from Eleanor, but a few, the ones who had always been loyal to me, whispered stories of shady deals, unethical practices, and a culture of fear and intimidation that permeated Zenith. I learned that Eleanor had been systematically pushing out anyone who threatened her position, consolidating her power and surrounding herself with yes men who would blindly follow her orders. She had been planning this for months, maybe even years. And I, in my naivete, had been completely oblivious to it all. The more I learned, the more determined I became. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about all the people Eleanor had wronged, all the lives she had ruined in her relentless pursuit of power and wealth. I was going to expose her, not just for my sake, but for theirs as well. I started spending hours researching corporate law, looking for loopholes, uncovering potential violations. I became obsessed, driven by a burning desire for justice. Sleep became a luxury I could barely afford. My apartment transformed into a war room, filled with documents, charts, and timelines. I was building my case, brick by brick, gathering the evidence I needed to bring Eleanor down. It was a slow, painstaking process, but I was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. They thought they had broken me. They thought I was defeated. They were wrong. The game had just begun. It all came crashing down on a Tuesday. I received an eviction notice. My meager savings were gone, and I was weeks behind on rent. The weight of it all, the job loss, the betrayal, the mounting debt, the crushing loneliness, became unbearable. I sat in my darkened apartment, staring at the eviction notice, the words swimming before my eyes. It felt like the walls were closing in on me, suffocating me. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. My family, always supportive, was struggling financially themselves. I couldn't burden them with my problems. My friends, sympathetic as they were, couldn't offer any real help. I was alone, utterly and completely alone. The darkness threatened to consume me, to swallow me whole. I picked up a framed photo of my grandfather, the man who had built the building that housed Zenith, the man who had instilled in me a sense of integrity and justice. His eyes seemed to bore into me, questioning my resolve. I looked away, ashamed. I had let him down. I had let myself down. I was on the verge of losing everything, of becoming a failure. The thought of it was devastating. I remember standing on my balcony that night, the city lights blurring below. The wind whipped around me, carrying the sounds of the city, the distant sirens, the muffled conversations. It felt like the city was mocking me, celebrating my downfall. A wave of despair washed over me, so intense that it threatened to pull me under. For a moment, I considered just ending it all, of simply giving up. The thought was tempting, a release from the pain, a way to escape the darkness. But then, I saw my reflection in the glass door. A stranger stared back at me, gaunt, hollow-eyed, defeated. Was that really me? Had I become so broken, so lost? A flicker of anger sparked within me, a refusal to be defined by my circumstances. I wouldn't let Eleanor win. I wouldn't let her destroy me. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me defeated. Something shifted inside me, a subtle but profound change. The despair began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wouldn't just survive this, I would thrive. I would rise from the ashes, stronger and more determined than ever. I went back inside, my mind racing. I knew I couldn't stay in this apartment any longer. I had to find a new place to live, something more affordable, something that wouldn't remind me of my failure. I started searching online, scouring classified ads, reaching out to friends and acquaintances. After days of searching, I finally found a small, dingy apartment in a less desirable part of town. It wasn't much, but it was all I could afford. It was a far cry from my previous life, but I didn't care. It was a fresh start, a chance to rebuild. I packed my belongings, what little I had left, and moved into the new apartment. The walls were bare, the furniture was sparse, but it was mine. It was a sanctuary, a place where I could lick my wounds and plan my next move. I sat on the floor of my new apartment, surrounded by boxes, the silence broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. The reality of my situation sunk in. I was broke, unemployed, and living in a rundown apartment. My life had been turned upside down. But amidst the despair, a new feeling began to emerge, a burning desire for revenge. Eleanor had taken everything from me, and now it was my turn to take something from her. I wouldn't let her get away with it. I would expose her for who she really was and bring her empire crashing down. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed allies, people who had also been wronged by Eleanor, people who were willing to fight back. I started reaching out to my old colleagues again, this time with a different approach. I didn't ask for sympathy or help, I offered them a chance to be a part of something bigger, a chance to bring down a corrupt CEO and a company built on lies. To my surprise, many of them were eager to join me. They had been waiting for someone to take the lead, someone to give them the courage to speak out. Together, we formed a secret alliance, a group of disgruntled former employees united by a common goal: to expose Eleanor and bring her to justice. We started meeting in secret, sharing information, strategizing, and planning our next move. I was no longer alone. I had a team, a network of allies who believed in me and who were willing to fight alongside me. The tide was turning. The game had changed. And Eleanor Vance had no idea what was coming. I smiled. I acted broken. But I was recording everything. The smile I wore was a mask, a carefully crafted illusion designed to lull them into a false sense of security. I attended industry events, made small talk with Eleanor, even congratulated her niece on her meteoric rise within Zenith. Inside, I was seething, but outwardly, I was the picture of grace and acceptance. They thought I was defeated, harmless. They couldn't have been more wrong. All the while, I was meticulously gathering evidence, building an airtight case against them. I invested in a tiny, high-quality voice recorder, small enough to conceal in my clothing, and started documenting every interaction I had with Eleanor and her inner circle. Every conversation, every meeting, every phone call was recorded and transcribed. It was tedious work, but I knew that even the smallest detail could be crucial. I also hired a private investigator, a former law enforcement officer named Mark, who specialized in corporate fraud. He was discreet, resourceful, and utterly ruthless. Mark helped me uncover a web of shady deals, offshore accounts, and falsified documents that pointed directly to Eleanor's illegal activities. The deeper we dug, the more dirt we found. Zenith was built on a foundation of lies and deceit, and Eleanor was the architect of it all. I remember one particular close call that sent my heart racing. I was at a Zenith-sponsored gala, schmoozing with potential clients, when Eleanor approached me with a suspicious glint in her eye. "You know, I've been hearing things," she said, her voice dripping with honeyed menace. "Rumors that you're not quite as happy as you appear to be." I forced a laugh. "Eleanor, darling, you know me. Always smiling, always positive." She narrowed her eyes, studying me intently. "Just be careful," she warned. "Some bridges are best left unburned." That night, I barely slept, convinced that she was onto me. I immediately contacted Mark, and we swept my apartment for listening devices, finding 3 cleverly concealed microphones planted by Eleanor's security team. It was a chilling reminder of the lengths she was willing to go to protect her secrets. The discovery only fueled my determination. I knew I was playing a dangerous game, but I was prepared to risk everything to bring her down. One of the most crucial pieces of evidence came from a former Zenith accountant named David, who had been wrongfully terminated after discovering discrepancies in the company's financial records. He was terrified of Eleanor, afraid that she would retaliate against him if he spoke out. I spent weeks building trust with him, assuring him that he was not alone and that we would protect him. Finally, he agreed to share his story and provide us with copies of the incriminating documents he had managed to smuggle out of Zenith before he was fired. Those documents were a goldmine. They detailed a complex scheme of tax evasion, money laundering, and embezzlement that implicated Eleanor and several other senior executives. With David's testimony and the documents in hand, we had enough evidence to launch a full-scale investigation. But I didn't want to simply hand the evidence over to the authorities. I wanted to expose Eleanor publicly, to humiliate her and destroy her reputation. I wanted the world to see her for who she really was, a ruthless, corrupt CEO who had built her empire on the backs of others. My plan was to leak the documents to a major news outlet, a reputable investigative journalism organization that had a track record of exposing corporate corruption. I contacted a journalist named Sarah, a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter who had a reputation for taking down powerful figures. I shared my story with her, provided her with copies of the documents, and introduced her to David and other former Zenith employees who were willing to speak on the record. Sarah was intrigued, but she was also cautious. She knew that Eleanor was a powerful and influential figure, and she didn't want to publish anything without verifying the evidence independently. She spent weeks fact-checking, interviewing sources, and poring over the documents. Finally, she was convinced. She had enough evidence to run the story. The day before the article was scheduled to be published, I received a threatening phone call from Eleanor. "I know what you're up to," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "You think you can bring me down? You're just a disgruntled former employee. No one will believe you." I remained calm, refusing to let her intimidate me. "The truth will come out, Eleanor," I said. "And when it does, you'll have nowhere to hide." She hung up on me, but I knew that she wouldn't give up easily. I alerted Mark, and he increased security around my apartment, fearing that Eleanor might try to silence me before the article was published. I spent the night on edge, expecting the worst. Every creak, every shadow sent my heart racing. But nothing happened. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of phone calls and text messages. The article had been published. It was a devastating exposé, detailing Eleanor's corruption, her lies, and her abuse of power. The article included excerpts from the documents we had leaked, as well as interviews with David and other former Zenith employees who had been wronged by Eleanor. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The article went viral, spreading like wildfire across social media. People were outraged, calling for Eleanor's resignation and demanding a full investigation into Zenith's business practices. The stock price plummeted, wiping out billions of dollars in shareholder value. Eleanor's empire was crumbling before her very eyes. Their biggest weakness? They thought they were untouchable. The news coverage was relentless. Every major network, every newspaper, every website was covering the Zenith scandal. Eleanor became a pariah, shunned by her peers, abandoned by her allies. She lawyered up, of course, hiring a team of high-priced attorneys to defend her against the inevitable lawsuits and criminal charges. But it was too late. The damage was done. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. I watched it all unfold from my dingy apartment, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. I had done it. I had brought down Eleanor Vance. But I knew that this was just the beginning. The legal battles would drag on for years, and Eleanor would fight tooth and nail to protect her wealth and her freedom. I had to be prepared for anything. I also knew that Eleanor would be looking for revenge. She wouldn't let me get away with this. She would come after me, and she would stop at nothing to destroy me. I had to be careful. I had to protect myself. I installed a state-of-the-art security system in my apartment, complete with cameras, motion sensors, and a panic button that would alert the authorities in case of an emergency. I also started carrying a concealed weapon, a small handgun that I had learned to use at a local shooting range. I hated the thought of resorting to violence, but I knew that I had to be prepared to defend myself if necessary. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. The Zenith scandal continued to dominate the headlines, but slowly, the media's attention began to wane. People moved on to other things, other scandals. But I didn't. I couldn't. I was still consumed by my desire for justice, by my determination to see Eleanor pay for her crimes. And I was still waiting, watching, preparing for her inevitable counterattack. Then, one day, I received an anonymous tip that changed everything. It was a single, cryptic email, containing a link to a hidden file on a secure server. The email was untraceable, the server located in a foreign country. I hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to click on the link. It could be a trap, a virus, anything. But my curiosity got the better of me. I clicked on the link and downloaded the file. It was a video. A video of Eleanor meeting with a group of shady businessmen in a private jet. The audio was muffled, but I could make out snippets of their conversation. They were discussing a plan to move Zenith's assets offshore, to hide them from the authorities and avoid paying taxes. They were also talking about bribing government officials to cover up their illegal activities. The video was damning. It was irrefutable proof of Eleanor's corruption. But there was something else in the video, something even more shocking. A brief, fleeting glimpse of a familiar face, a face I hadn't seen in years. My brother, Michael. What was he doing with Eleanor? What was he involved in? I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. Michael had always been a bit of a black sheep, prone to making bad decisions. But I never thought he would get involved in something like this. I tried calling him, but he didn't answer. I sent him a text message, but he didn't respond. I started to panic. I had to find him. I had to know what was going on. I reached out to Mark, the private investigator, and asked him to track down Michael. It didn't take him long. He found him living in a luxury apartment in Miami, living a life of extravagant wealth. Mark sent me photos of Michael, lounging by the pool, driving a sports car, partying with beautiful women. He looked happy, carefree. But there was something in his eyes, a shadow of guilt, a hint of desperation. I knew that he was in trouble. I had to help him. I flew to Miami the next day, determined to confront Michael and get to the bottom of things. I found him at a trendy nightclub, surrounded by a crowd of admirers. He was drunk, slurring his words, acting like he didn't have a care in the world. I pushed my way through the crowd and grabbed his arm. "Michael, we need to talk," I said, my voice trembling with anger and concern. He looked at me, his eyes widening in surprise. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice laced with annoyance. "I know about Eleanor," I said. "I know about the offshore accounts, the bribes, everything. And I know you're involved." He tried to deny it, but I could see the truth in his eyes. He was caught. He had no way out. I dragged him out of the nightclub and into a taxi. We drove to his apartment, where I confronted him with the video. He broke down, confessing everything. He had been working for Eleanor for years, helping her manage her illegal activities. He had been seduced by the money, the power, the lifestyle. He knew it was wrong, but he couldn't resist the temptation. Now, he was trapped. Eleanor had threatened him, telling him that if he ever tried to leave, she would expose him and destroy his life. He was living in constant fear, knowing that his past could catch up with him at any moment. I felt a mix of anger, disappointment, and pity for my brother. He had made a terrible mistake, but he was still my brother. I couldn't abandon him. I promised him that I would help him, that I would find a way to get him out of this mess. But I knew that it wouldn't be easy. Eleanor was a dangerous woman, and she wouldn't let Michael go without a fight. I devised a plan, a risky plan that could potentially backfire and destroy everything I had worked for. But it was the only way to save Michael and bring Eleanor to justice once and for all. I convinced Michael to cooperate with the authorities, to provide them with all the information he had about Eleanor's illegal activities. In exchange, he would receive immunity from prosecution. It was a gamble, but it was worth it. Michael agreed, and we contacted the FBI. They were eager to hear what he had to say. They set up a meeting with Michael and his lawyer, and he laid everything out on the table. He told them about the offshore accounts, the bribes, the money laundering, everything. He also provided them with documents and other evidence to support his claims. The FBI was thrilled. They had been investigating Eleanor for years, but they had never had enough evidence to bring her down. Now, thanks to Michael, they had everything they needed. They immediately launched a full-scale investigation, raiding Zenith's headquarters, seizing documents, and interviewing employees. They also obtained a warrant for Eleanor's arrest. But Eleanor was nowhere to be found. She had disappeared, gone into hiding. The FBI launched a nationwide manhunt, but they couldn't find her. It was like she had vanished into thin air. I knew that she wouldn't stay hidden for long. She was too arrogant, too accustomed to power. She would eventually resurface, and when she did, I would be ready for her. I set the trap. I used Michael as bait, leaking information to Eleanor's contacts that he was ready to meet and hand over crucial data that would exonerate her. It was a lie, of course. The meeting was a setup. A trap designed to lure her out of hiding and into the hands of the authorities. The exact day they tried to end me. I exposed the truth. The abandoned warehouse district reeked of stale seawater and decay, the perfect backdrop for betrayal. I watched from a distance, the feed from Mark's hidden camera painting the scene on my phone screen. Michael stood alone, nervously fidgeting, the weak light glinting off the sweat on his brow. Then, a black SUV screeched to a halt, and she emerged. Eleanor. Even in the grainy footage, her arrogance was palpable, her tailored suit screaming wealth and power. She approached Michael, her face a mask of icy fury. "Where is it?" she demanded, her voice barely a whisper but laced with venom. Michael stammered, trying to explain that he needed assurances, that he was risking everything. Eleanor's response was swift and brutal. Two men emerged from the SUV, grabbing Michael and shoving him against the wall. I clenched my fist, my nails digging into my palm. This was it. The moment of truth. I gave Mark the signal. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Eleanor's eyes widened in panic as she realized she had been had. The warehouse doors burst open, and a swarm of FBI agents flooded the scene, weapons drawn. Eleanor's bodyguards lunged forward, attempting to shield her, but they were quickly subdued. Eleanor stood frozen, her face a mask of disbelief as the agents closed in. "You," she screamed, her eyes locking onto Michael. "You betrayed me." Michael hung his head, shame etched on his face. As Eleanor was being led away in handcuffs, her eyes met mine. I was standing just outside the warehouse, a ghost in the shadows, watching her empire crumble. The hate in her gaze was pure, unadulterated venom. "This isn't over," she shrieked, her voice hoarse with rage. "I'll ruin you. I'll ruin you both." I simply smiled, a cold, detached smile that mirrored the emptiness I had felt for so long. The news exploded. Eleanor Vance, the titan of industry, the philanthropist, the darling of the business world, was exposed as a fraud, a criminal, a monster. The video from the private jet was leaked, along with countless other documents detailing her web of corruption. Zenith's stock plummeted, the company teetering on the brink of collapse. Lawsuits piled up, investors fled, and the empire she had built crumbled to dust. Michael, under the protection of the FBI, provided them with everything. The years of illegal activity. The people she had hurt. The lives she had ruined. He brought it all crashing down. Eleanor's fall from grace was swift and merciless. She was stripped of her titles, her awards, her reputation. Her friends abandoned her, her allies deserted her, and she was left alone, a pariah in the very world she had once ruled. I watched it all unfold from afar, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. It was over. The years of planning, the sacrifices, the risks, had all paid off. I had finally achieved my revenge. Not just for me, but for everyone she had wronged. The employees she had cheated, the families she had destroyed, the lives she had twisted for her own personal gain. I watched from a distance as they led her into the courthouse. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow. The power she once radiated was gone, replaced by a look of utter defeat. I saw her, and I felt nothing. The legal battles dragged on for months, but the outcome was never in doubt. Eleanor was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. She was sentenced to decades behind bars, her life of luxury replaced by a cold, sterile prison cell. Michael, having cooperated fully with the authorities, was given a new identity and a chance to start over. He moved far away, to a place where no one knew his past, and began the long, arduous process of rebuilding his life. I received a letter from him a few months later, thanking me for saving him, for giving him a second chance. He expressed his remorse for his actions and his determination to make amends. I wrote back, telling him that I forgave him, that I was proud of him for doing the right thing. I closed the chapter on Zenith, on Eleanor, on the years of pain and suffering. It was finally over. They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.